One year when I was about 9, my little brother, some of my friends, and I all decided to go to my neighborhood's community pool together. We packed our towels and put on our bathing suits. My mom sprayed sunblock on each of us before we got in the car. We were so excited. None of us really had that many pool toys, so we improvised. I brought a few stuffed animals, and my friends brought 2 of those little bouncy balls you buy at the dollar store. When we finally arrived, we ran to the gate. The man asked for my mother's card. She smiled and handed it to him. He looked over the card and nodded, opening the gate for all of us. As my brother and my friends spilled in, my mom leaned down to my level. She told me that I was the oldest, so I was responsible enough to make sure that nothing bad happened. I said okay, and ran off to go play in the pool with my friends. For a while we just swam around and threw the balls back and forth at each other. But eventually we all got bored of our makeshift pool toys and decided to play a game. I suggested Marco Polo. Everyone agreed. After a while of evading the tagger, I was eventually made it by one of my friends. So I closed my eyes. Before I could shout the first Marco, my mother announced that she had to go to the bathroom. We all said okay, and she left us. I shouted Marco, which was followed by 4 polos. I decided that I would try to catch my brother since he hadn't been it yet. But when I shouted the next Marco, something strange happened. I heard more than 4 polos. That day there had been no one else but us at the pool. There were 5 of us kids, plus my mom. Us kids were the only ones in the pool at the time. So who was the 4th polo? I shouted Marco again, followed by 3 hesitant polos, and 1 more confident polo. It sounded like a man. He had a deep voice. Marco, I shouted again, with fear in my voice. Each time I shouted, the strange voice would respond with 3 polos, as if asking me to pick him. I didn't want to, but I decided to pursue his voice. I kept shouting for what felt like a century. By now my friends weren't even responding anymore. They just watched as I went after the strange man. I didn't dare open my eyes to peek. I feared that if I did, he might see that I was cheating and attack me. I was getting closer, I could tell. My hand was outstretched and shaking. As I said my last Marco, I realized that his polo was weaker than before. Then I touched him. A cold, wet body was all I felt. He began laughing childishly, saying things like, "You got me," and "I'm it now." I opened my eyes reluctantly, yet I saw nothing. I smiled a little, glad that it was all over. I looked over to my friends, who were obviously shaken. When my mom came back from the restroom, we asked her if we could go home. She asked us why, and we just told her that we were tired. She said, "All right," but was still a little suspicious of us. The car ride home was quiet, and no one spoke a word of what they saw. I was beginning to think that I was the only one who saw it, even though deep down I knew that that wasn't true. When we got back home, my mom was preparing a shower for us. We all sat, huddled up in my room. Everything was silent, until one of my friends finally asked if we saw the man too. We all shouted out a relieved yes. Then we all began talking and joking about it, even though we were still scared out of our minds. They were all complimenting me on how brave I was. Facing up to a ghost was what they were calling it. I wasn't sure about it being a ghost, though, seeing as how I could touch it. The next day, my friends came over to my house, bearing drawings and paintings of the ghost to show me. Their drawings were mediocre and barely showed any resemblance to a man at all. However, the drawings still managed to frighten me, as they depicted a tall man with large yellow eyes. Whether or not these eyes were just added on for effect, I didn't know. Even now, 11 years later, that experience still keeps me up at night. Not even getting closure seemed to help. You see, I decided one year when I was 15 that I would get some closure and find out if anything bad had happened at that pool. I asked one of my good friends there at the pool if he had heard any rumors about people dying at the pool. He said yes, that he actually had. Apparently, back in the 70s, there was a man named Daniel, who was the father of 6 children. His wife was very controlling and wouldn't let them out of the house very often. So when they eventually convinced her to let them go to the pool, the father was overjoyed. He played with the kids constantly, his favorite game being Marco Polo. Since he was so big and tall, the kids had no problem catching him, so he was Marco very often. My friend told me that people would describe him as a gentle giant, what with him being 7 feet tall. One day, after years of coming out to the pool without incident, Daniel's youngest son drowned. Daniel felt so guilty that one night, after hours, he jumped the fence, as there was no gate back then, and drowned himself in the pool. The police said that his eyes looked like they had yellowed after examination. No one knew why, though. However, this was all just a rumor. I felt a little more comforted knowing that the man whom I played Marco Polo with was friendly. However, that didn't change much. I still don't play Marco Polo